So let us proceed now to the hearing proper. So we would like to, the chair now recognizes the Secretary of the Department of Education, Secretary Sani Angara, for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Magandang umaga po sa ating Chairperson Zaldico, Senior Vice Chair Stella Kimbo, of course to our budget sponsor Maricar Zamora, sa mga Vice Chairs ng ginagalang na Committee on Appropriations and Committee on Rules, na dati rin akong pong miyembro sa ating mga kaibigan, representatives of the various districts and the party list. Of course, to my DepEd family, ladies and gentlemen, magandang umaga po. With your permission, Madam Chair, we have about a 55-page presentation, a slideshow, and followed by a short video. If we may begin, Madam Chair, we will present the 2023 and 2024 accomplishments. This represents the hard work and dedication of the more than 1 million strong public servants of the DepEd, and also the tangible impact of the budget allocations which Congress has graciously granted us. So next slide, please. These are some of the highlights, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. 4,071 new classrooms constructed in 2023, 1,985 classrooms repaired and reconstructed, 11 Gabaldon Heritage Schools restored, 44,638 ICT packages procured for delivery, 30,854,386 textbooks and other learning resources procured for delivery, 21,529,971 science and math equipment procured for delivery, and 499,264 TechVoc equipment procured for delivery. Next slide, please. As you mentioned, Madam Chair, the President is clear that he wants us to improve the quality of learning. Thus, for fiscal year 2023, we have hired 11,118 new teaching and 4,860 non-teaching personnel as of June 30, 2024, as well as we have trained 915,815 teachers and teaching-related staff. Next slide, please. Next slide is the support to our schools and learners. So we have over 5.5 million learner beneficiaries benefited under the school-based feeding program. And for government assistance and subsidies, we have over 971,000 junior high school learner grantees benefited under the Education Service Contracting, or the ESC program, over 1.3 million senior high school voucher program learner grantees under the senior high school voucher program, and over 131,000 learner grantees under the joint delivery voucher program. Next slide, please. This slide, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, illustrates the DepEd's budget utilization report over the years, starting in 2018 up to the current year. Current year obligation report rate rather is 51%, Your Honors. So of the 765.9 billion. We have obligated 387.8 billion, Your Honors. For the past 5 years, the DepEd has consistently demonstrated strong budget utilization, achieving an obligation rate of 90% and above, peaking at 97% in 2021 and maintaining 95% in both 2022 and 2023. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So some of the recent milestones, Your Honors, include MOAs, or memoranda, with the Department of Trade and Industry and Thames International to reinforce senior high school curriculum and increase the work immersion and work experience of our senior high school learners. Also, MOAs with the Board of Investments, the P Corp, or the Private Sector Jobs and Skills Corporation, witnessed by no less than the President, representing several industries. Receiving the Senior High School Task Force report from ADB, which was a joint effort of the DepEd and ADB. Joint memorandum circular with TESDA on SHS TVET for the embedment of TVET training regulations in the SHS curriculum. And also an MOU with I Am the Code to offer free coding lessons to our junior high school and senior high school students. Next slide, please. others are digital partnerships with the digital education partnerships with Khan Academy, which is used in over 100 or almost 200 countries by over 100 million registered users. So it is by far the most popular education software in the world, and they're going into things like AI tutors as well, Your Honors. We've also done an engagement with the local publishers to accelerate the delivery of books and learning resources. We've issued policy guidelines on the implementation of the Matatag curriculum, as well as guidelines on amending the utilization of the Madrasa Education Program Fund. Next slide, please. As mentioned by Kong Zamora, we also issued the implementing rules for the recently enacted Kabalikat sa Pagtuturo Act, which increased the teaching allowance for our teachers as well as made it tax-free. Thank you to the action of Congress on this. We've also issued the IRR on the expanded career progression system, providing more career opportunities for our teachers. Yung sinabi po ni Pangulo na wala na dapat mag-retire na teacher one. Home economics graduates are now allowed to teach home economics related subjects. Our National Vision Screening Act under the IRR to screen the eye vision of kindergarten pupils, IRRs on instituting a policy of inclusion and services for learners with disabilities in support of the Inclusive Education Act, and IRR to lengthen the school calendar from 200 days to not more than 220 days. Next slide, please. Also issued DepEd Memorandum 37 to rationalize the performance evaluation and lessen teachers' workload. This is also pursuant to the President's instruction. This is ongoing, Your Honors. Prompt coordination and recognition of private sector partners for the Oplan, Balik Eskwela, and Brigada Eskwela, and we also thank our representatives for helping our schools open on time, Your Honors. Participation in the ongoing formation of the Education Cabinet Cluster as mandated by the President with a view towards better and coordinated education outcomes. Next slide, please. Some of the challenges, and as mentioned, there are many challenges, Your Honors, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. Some of these include getting good jobs for our graduates, achieving positive learning outcomes, having a good learning environment for our learners, improving our teachers' welfare, and of course the persistent resource gaps. If I may tackle them shortly, briefly one by one, Your Honors. First, jobs for graduates. Studies of the PIDS show that there is a reluctance among most firms to hire senior high school graduates, as well as slightly over 20% of senior high school graduates entered the labor force. Only slightly over 20% of senior high school graduates entered the labor force. And among employers, in a survey of 70 of the country's leading companies, only around 20% were inclined to hire senior high school graduates. So to address this, the DepEd has been engaging employers to determine what skills they need and how our learners can develop them through curriculum and work immersion. Other current initiatives include undertaking an evaluation of the K-12 curriculum, an expanded work immersion, more hours to gain better experience, aligning senior high school competencies with the Philippine qualifications framework. Next slide, please. Another challenge are achieving positive learning outcomes, Your Honors. 15-year-old Filipino learners lag behind 6 ASEAN countries in the most recent PISA 2022 tests, except for Cambodia. And less than 25% reach the minimum proficiency levels in reading, math, and science in the same PISA exam. And in the Southeast Asian PLM 2019 exam, grade 5 Filipino learners ranked 4th among 6 Southeast Asian countries in reading, math, and writing. And only 10% met the minimum standard in reading, while 17 met the minimum standard in math. Some of the ways forward here, Your Honors, is to continuously improve the implementation of the curriculum, to review and to strengthen our learning recovery programs, to capacitate learners and schools for national and international assessments, to provide hybrid and computer-based and online modalities for assessments, and to use assessment data well to inform policy, teaching, and learning, as well as to provide targeted support to low-achieving learners, as well as to support and promote inclusive education programs. Next slide, please. This slide shows learners, what we mentioned earlier, the learners' performance in national assessment tests, ELNA, the NAT, or the achievement test for grade 6, for grade 10, and for grade 12, Your Honors. Most learners are at low and nearly proficient levels in all national assessments, with only a few reaching proficient and highly proficient levels. As learners progress to the higher grades, proficiency levels tend to decline, highlighting the need for targeted interventions to improve learning outcomes in the later key stages. Next slide, please. Another challenge is teacher welfare, Your Honor. We are working on outdated staffing standards, Your Honors. This has caused teachers to undertake administrative and ancillary tasks in schools, which we are trying to address. Teachers used to bear the burden of about 50 administrative and ancillary tasks, as well as with respect to promotion. It takes approximately 15 years to get from teacher 1 to teacher 3, which is why we passed the IRR or issued the IRR for the career progression to enable faster, swifter promotion and more positions for our beloved teachers, Madam Chair. The staffing standards for schools were last developed in 1997, and this is there's an urgent need to update this. And to address some of these issues, we have undertaken these initiatives, ongoing studies on school organization and staffing standards, as mentioned, the enhanced career progression, the filling up of items for admin officers, the earlier mentioned TWG on the RPMS or the ancillary tasks of school teachers, as well as the added, we're also thankful to the President for announcing the SSL 6 that should help our teachers and non-teaching staff, Your Honors. Next slide, please. Another challenge is the learning environment. The Philippines is now referred to as the bullying capital of Asia, and we have bullying rates double the OECD average, and 63.2% of grade 5 students experience bullying at least once a month. Also nutrition is a challenge, as 16% of Filipino kinder to grade 6 children are severely wasted. And 1 in every 3 Filipino children were stunted or too short for their age. And to compound this environment, there is a systemic problem regarding the absence of guidance counselors, Your Honors. There are over 4,000 vacancies, since there is a law which requires guidance counselors in schools to have a master's degree. And there are very few guidance counselors in the pipeline. So some of the programs to improve the learning environment problems include the school feeding program, the school health programs, the Safer Schools project, mental health program, the upgrading of guidance counselor items to make them more attractive to registered guidance counselors. These are some of those initiatives, Your Honor. Next slide, please. Of course, as mentioned also by our esteemed chair and vice chair, there are resource gaps which have existed for some time. 159,202 classrooms are needed, amounting to 398 billion. 2,001 schools lack access to electricity. Over 174,000 classrooms need major repair. There are over 18,000 schools without internet. There's a need for over 56,000 teachers and over 20,000 non-teaching personnel. So some of the current initiatives to address this include the school building program, the electrification program, school-wide internet connections in all schools by 2029, and partnerships with the private sector and with international orgs for supply side support. One of the last bills we filed, Your Honors, also before assuming the secretaryship was an amendment to the Adapta School, and hopefully that can pass both the House and the Senate, because donations of computers and even trainings can be deducted from a private company's or corporation's income tax, and it will incentivize the private sector to help fill some of the resource gaps, Your Honors. And next slide, please. Some of the ways forward, Your Honors. So we have a 5-point agenda pursuant to the SONA directives of President Marcos to focus on improving education outcomes. First, we will make sure our senior high school graduates are employable and empowered to harness the totality of their potential. Second, we will improve the quality of education, our performance in international large-scale assessments, and address literacy and numeracy in the early years. Third, we will uplift and upskill teachers to make sure that teachers are trained and well supported, ensuring they can concentrate on teaching and are capacitated to be effective in achieving quality. Fourth, we will ensure the physical and mental well-being of our learners to enjoy learning that is free from bullying and mental health burdens, and to put a premium on ensuring a positive learning experience for our learners. And fifth, we hope to help address the classroom gap and the digital gap and solve the perennial problem of textbooks. All of this within a child-centered, enabling environment. Next slide, please. Regarding employability of our learners, some of the steps include empowering them for employment by decluttering the senior high school curriculum. Currently, all 4 tracks are required to take 15 subjects, and we feel that is way too much, and certainly more than what most countries around the world require of their students. To enhance work immersion programs for senior high school students, to fund and support the assessment and certification of our senior high school and TVET graduates. Next slide, please. To raise the quality of our education, to continuously improve the curriculum, taking into account the inputs from the various schools and teachers, to review and strengthen our learning recovery programs, to provide targeted support to our low-achieving learners, to capacitate learners, teachers, and schools for international assessments, to leverage technologies and provide hybrid computer-based and online modalities, to use assessment data to inform policy, teaching and learning, and to support and promote inclusive education programs. Next slide, please. The President is particularly concerned about the next PISA exam, and this is in March 2025, next year, just a few months from now. And so we have formed a PISA technical working group within the department to organize test materials and school infrastructure assessments. Starting in September, we will digitize test items with ICTS and Khan Academy and introduce a PISA-focused science program. That is the timeline there, Your Honors. From October to December, we'll hold learning sessions for 1.6 million 15-year-old public school learners. This is the universe of the PISA takers, Your Honor, except we won't know the actual PISA takers until February 2025. But in January 2025, the OECD will select around 150 public schools, and DepEd will provide them with the necessary ICT equipment. In February 2025, they will narrow down the universe to 7,000 public school learners who will be identified to take the PISA exam, and we will continue our intensive learning sessions. And the PISA survey will be conducted in March 2025 with final results expected by late 2026. It will be 60% science, so that is a particular challenge for the Philippine education system given the lack of science teachers and our poor performance in previous assessments and tests. Next slide, please. Ways forward, we need to uplift and upskill our teachers pursuant to the President's direction to enable them to concentrate on teaching and reduce their administrative tasks, to ensure merit-based promotion and fair compensation, to increase school MOE, ensuring proper support to teachers for classroom expenses, to have teacher training and professional development, and make them effective and measurable, Your Honors. Next slide, please. Another concern is the physical and mental well-being of our learners. Thus, we must ensure health, nutrition, and safety in schools, address bullying, and ensure a positive learning environment. Next slide, please. Perennially challenging, of course, is the classroom gap as well as the digital gap. The perennial problem of textbooks also needs to be resolved, Your Honors. Thus, empowering the regions, the SDOs, or the division offices, and the schools by decentralizing key processes, ensuring schools have enough classrooms, electricity, running water, internet connections, improving turnaround time and streamlining processes of procurement, efficient and accurate data collection and analysis, increasing partnerships with the private sector, as well as increased digitalization of learning. Next slide, please. With your permission, Mr. Chair, Your Honors, we now proceed to the fiscal year 2025 National Expenditure Program and our budget proposal. Next slide, please. The total proposed appropriations for the DepEd, as well as its 6 attached agencies, the National Book Development Board, the National Council for Children's Television, the National Museum, the Philippine High School for the Arts, the Early Child Care and Development Council, the National Academy for Sports. The total proposed appropriations, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, amounts to 793.18 billion pesos. And this includes the budget for the 6. For the NBDB, 150 million. For the National Council for Children's Television, or NCCT, 66.7 million. For the National Museum of the Philippines, 1.35 billion. For the Philippine High School for the Arts, 113.5 million. For the Early Child Care and Development Council, 354 million. And for the National Academy of Sports, 256 million. Next slide, please. If we compare the NEP, or the proposed budget for 2025, against the fiscal year 2024 GAA, these are the figures on the screen, Your Honors. The OSEC or NEP is 4.11% higher as compared to the 2024 GAA. And while the department's NEP is 4.5% higher as compared to the 2024 NEP, or an increase of around 30 billion. Yeah. These figures are for Your Honor's perusal. There are decreases in the 2025 NEP versus the 2024 GAA, as many of these agency budgets were increased by Congress, Your Honors. Next slide, please. Yeah. So some salient features, Your Honors, of the 2025 NEP, or National Expenditure Program, are on the screen. So basic education facilities, the funds for construction of new classrooms, 15 billion. For repair and rehab, 6.13 billion. Provision of school furniture, 2.62 billion. Medium-rise school buildings, 2 billion. Provision and upgrading of electricity in school sites, 1.3 billion. Provision of priority school health facilities, 0.5 billion. Library hubs, 1 billion. ILRCs, or Inclusive Learning Resource Centers, 0.21 billion. Community Learning Centers, 0.06 billion. For learning tools and equipment, 3.55 billion, including science and math equipment and tech book equipment. For computerization program, 12.36 billion, includes the provision of e-learning cards, smart TV packages, laptops for non-teaching personnel, provision of school-wide internet to schools, and then textbooks for and other instructional materials amounting to 12.41 billion. Next slide, please. Some other salient features include 5.5 billion for teaching positions, the creation and filling up of new teaching positions, the 3.43 billion for the creation and filling up of new non-teaching positions, 2.23 billion for teacher trainings, 11.78 billion for school-based feeding, 40.5 billion for the GASPE, or government assistance and subsidies to the private sector. Next slide, please. This is the figure for the per capita cost for every DepEd learner, 31,612 pesos, Your Honors. Next slide, please. This is a historical chart of our per capita cost, Your Honors. It has increased over the years, but of course, the cost of living has also increased. Thank you. Next slide, please. The next slide shows the historical DepEd budget from 2020 to 2025, Your Honor, just by way of comparison. There are figures of the DepEd budget in yellow as a percent of the national budget, as a percent of GDP, nominal GDP, and also the growth rate, Your Honor, over the years. So as mentioned earlier, the proposed 2025 NEP is 4.1% higher than this year's. Next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison of the 2024 GAA, the 2025 proposed NEP, or rather, the 2025 proposed NEP and the budget submission of the department to the DBM, Your Honor, just for reference. So the proposal of the department was 976 billion, and what was granted was 790 billion. Next slide, please. This slide again shows the division between the different spending classes. So for the fiscal year 2025, PS is around 69%, Your Honors. MOE is 21%, and RLIP, or retirement and life insurance, is 5.7%, and capital outlay is 4.2%, Your Honor. Next slide, please. Your Honors, this is a comparative matrix by program expenditure classification, or the PREXI framework. So You have general administration and support, support to operations and the major programs, the education policy development, basic education inputs, inclusive education, support to schools and learners, education, human resource development program, as well as the foreign assisted projects, Your Honor, just to compare across the 2024 GAA and the proposals and the proposed NEP, Your Honor. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next, we are ready, Mr. Chairman, Your Honors, just briefly present the budget for the attached agencies to the DepEd. First, we have the National Book Development Board with a budget of proposed budget of 146.4 million, which is slightly higher than the 2024 NEP level of 128.5 million, but lower than the 2024 GAA by 87.6 million. Next slide, please. Next is the National Council for Children's Television, where the 2025 NEP amounts to 66.7 million, which is higher than the 2024 NEP level of 63 million, but lower than the 2024 GAA by 16.3 million. Next slide, please.